From the darkest reaches of space to the deepest corners of your mind. Welcome to From the Void.
Welcome to week 3 and the final week of our series on historic hauntings. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we definitely saved the best evidence for last, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But in this week's episode, we're covering Prospect Place in Trinway, Ohio. Prospect Place is a sprawling 29-room mansion built by abolitionist and businessman G.W. Adams back in 1856. The home, after he passed away, passed through various relatives before becoming abandoned for a time and was actually set for demolition in the late 1980s. Fortunately, it was saved by Dave Longaberger of Longaberger Basket fame. He was actually able to start the restoration process by putting on a new roof and various other improvements before passing away from cancer in the 1990s. After which, the G.W. Adams Education Center was established. They currently oversee the property and the restoration to this day. Prospect Place is an absolutely stunning property. It's been featured on all the ghost shows, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and Ghost Brothers. So check out all of the pictures that we have, like the prior 2 episodes. If you go to www.fromthevoidpod.com, you can check out through our blog all of the different pictures from our time there. We had the pleasure of meeting Amy Green, a longtime volunteer at Prospect Place, whose love of the history has kept her coming back for years. Amy gave us a complete tour of the house prior to our investigation and was kind enough to sit down for an interview. Here is Amy talking about the history of Prospect Place.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you inviting me. I love talking about Prospect Place, so that's an easy thing for me to do. Let's see. I've been involved with Prospect Place since 2019. And it's been a great experience. I'm on the board. I'm one of the trustees, and I am the treasurer. And so I get to know all the ins and outs of what's going on. Prospect Place is a 501(c) nonprofit, and so everybody, including the board, are volunteers. And we do it because we love it. To tell you a little bit about Prospect Place, the house itself was built in 1856. By a gentleman named John Williamson Adams. He was one of the biggest businessmen here in this area back in the day. And he was a miller of flour. He had two mills in what is now called Adams Mills, which is named after him, obviously. And then he also had one in Dresden. He owned 14,000 acres of land by 1861, and he owned several stores and things like that. So he was very wealthy. He was also on the board of 2 of the local railroad companies that went through the area. And he also owned 13,000 head of sheep, which helped support the war during the Civil War. And so that's a little bit about him. He also had 11 children. He had 2 wives. The first one had died after they had 5 children, and 2 of those children had died. So he had a remaining 3 daughters. And then he married his second wife, and they proceeded to have 6 children. And so all of those children that lived, of course, were raised in that house in Prospect Place. And so George himself, he made many friends. He also made many enemies. Several people took him to court for minor little things. But he also had very many friends that wrote about him and wrote positive things about him. So as far as his legacy, as far as his children, those children also, they grew up and were prominent individuals within the area. One of them became a prominent attorney in Zanesville, and then he also moved on to, he was the dean of the law school at the Ohio State University. And so another son became a lumber baron up in Minnesota. The girls, they ended up marrying wealthy individuals. There's also one that married a wealthy individual, but her story didn't turn out quite so well as the others. She married the boy next door basically after George died. And so they lived in Prospect Place then. And he had some issues. He was not the businessman that George was. And so he ended up getting them in a lot of debt and having to have an auction to sell off some of their property in order to settle those debts. Unfortunately, what he did was on the day of one of the auctions, he disappeared. And so the auctions couldn't take place. And so they tried to find him. They thought this dead body in Columbus was him, but it wasn't. Somebody thought they saw him out in Denver, Colorado. And then Anna's own cousin from Dresden actually saw him in San Francisco. And she even called to him, and he looked over his shoulder to see who it was. And when he recognized her, he just started walking faster, and he ducked into a cigar store and out into the back alley, and he was never seen again. And so Anna was kind of stuck holding the bag, and she ended up continuing the auctions and paying off the large debt, which would have been in our day millions of dollars. And so she and her sister and her son lived at Prospect Place until they passed away. So there's some interesting stories about Prospect Place that are true, and then there are some that are just legends, and we don't know if they're true. We definitely have a lot of experiences there too in regards to the paranormal.
As is the case with any location with such an amazing history, there are stories that are able to be corroborated and some that are not. Within those stories, there are true events that actually occurred, and there is pure legend. And sometimes it's somewhere in between the two. Here's Amy talking about a couple of those stories tied to Prospect Place.
Because this was during the Civil War that this house was lived in, the family lived in, and George himself was actually an abolitionist. And so he was part of the Underground Railroad. And he helped move former slaves north into Canada, into freedom. And so the slaves would come up from the south, from Zanesville, Ohio, on the river or by land, and they would get off their boat or wagon close to George's house, close to Prospect Place. And then George would then, as a conductor, he would move them even farther north. And so Prospect Place is known to be part of the Underground Railroad. And so there are things that did happen that were told, like a bounty hunter had come to the property looking for the escapees, looking for the former slaves to take them back down south. And the story goes that the slave hunter, this bounty hunter, came to the property, and the farmhands knew this and they didn't approve of it. And so they pretty much captured him and took him to the barn and held some sort of mock trial, found him guilty of who knows what, and hung him. We don't know where or, where his body might have been. But what happens now is an interesting experience, because a person could be upstairs, like in the cupola, the Belvedere. And so if they put a light up there, it kind of activates what's in the barn, which we believe might have been the bounty hunter. And so when individuals are in the barn, when that light is up above, people have been scratched and they've heard growling noises out there. They've also had experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant. Apparently, this entity, or whatever it is, does not like men. And so those are the ones that typically get scratched. But it does like females. And so I've had some females say, oh, it was a very nice, polite entity. But the guys usually say, no, no, it wasn't so nice. And so that's one of the experiences that happened at Prospect Place. And that one's actually in the barn.
One of the legacies of Prospect Place is its role in the Underground Railroad. The journey to escape bondage was fraught with danger, yet brave men and women risked everything for a chance at liberty. One of the major functions of Prospect Place under George Adams was as a safe haven along this perilous path. Here's Amy talking about the methods by which Prospect Place would provide a signal that it was safe to approach the house.
Well, as I said, they would come from the south, from where Zanesville is, which is right on the Muscatine River. And they could come up and get off there at the bend. And the bend is right close to where Prospect is, the bend in the river. And so they would know to get off there. And they could walk through the field and basically come up to Prospect Place. But they would only do that if there was a light up there in the cupola. And so that would mean it was safe. And so the back of the house has cellar doors, and individuals could walk in there. They would be escorted in there. And once they were inside that basement, you could take a broom and tap on the ceiling of the basement. And the ceiling of the basement is actually where George's bedroom is. And so you're tapping basically on his floor. And he would know then that there are individuals in his home seeking refuge. And of course, what was in the basement, you mentioned the herringbone brick, that was where the refrigeration pits were. And so there was food down there, and there was, of course, blankets and beds and things like that for the individuals to use while they stayed there until it was safer for them to move up north.
Here's Amy again, discussing one of the tragic legends associated with the house, the fate of a young girl.
So there is one in regards to a little girl, and she possibly fell to her death from the house. Above each porch was a portico and either a doorway or a window to get out onto it. And it was surrounded by a short little railing. And there's also a balcony on the back of the house. And so we haven't figured out which one it was, and we don't know who the little girl was. The stories persist, though, that when investigators do come to Prospect Place, that they do contact this little girl. Sometimes she has said that, when asked, "What are you doing?" Her response was, "I'm playing with my ducky." And so others have said she's an Indian girl because this was built on an Indian burial ground. And so we don't know who it was. I've done the research. I have checked things as far as those children that lived there when George built the house for his children. None of them, to my knowledge, fell off the balcony. They all lived to adulthood except for one baby girl. And so it couldn't have been her either. But when this little girl fell to her death, it was wintertime, and they took her into the basement where those refrigeration pits were, because there would have been ice in there. And she was kept in there until the spring thaw, when they could dig a grave for her. And it said that her mother came to the basement daily to grieve over her. So a lot of people get in contact with this little girl. I've not yet figured out who it might be. And whenever anybody comes, I always ask them, see what you can find out about this little girl to help us figure out who she is and what her story is. Because I think the story of the people are just so fascinating. But here's this one that I just can't figure this one out. She's pretty much a very pleasant entity. She always wants to play. And upstairs on the second floor is what we call the family's floor. It's where their bedrooms are and an upstairs parlor where they basically lived. And she's always up there. We don't see her or hear her or get in contact with her on any other floor other than the second floor.
As we'll share here in just a second, we had way more experiences on the second floor than any other part of the house. Here's Amy recounting some of the stories from some of the rooms on the second floor.
Okay. Well, the second floor is very active with children's voices and female voices. Like in Mary's room, we have had an investigator set a recorder down as he was assembling the rest of his equipment. And when he played that back the next day, he got a female's voice saying, "What's he doing?" And in other rooms like the parlor, it's typically children's voices. And we have had experiences where we've done the grid, and we had a flashlight on the mantle of the fireplace. And on command, that flashlight would either go on or off. Let's see, in the children's room, in the nursery, we've also had children's voices in there, but we've also had females crying in there. As I said, one child didn't make it past like 5 months. And so she may have passed away in that room. But the room that you were talking about, the boys' room, that is really, really active in there. Again, children's voices. But we've also had some other like adult entities that over the past couple of years have been a little demanding of us and has not been very pleasant. So we're trying to figure out what that is too. If that is something originally from the home or through the years, or whether maybe something has moved in unannounced and uninvited.
Now that Amy's covered some history of the second floor specifically, I want to share some of the experiences that we had. Before I get to that, though, it all kind of kicked off right away when we got there. So our night at Prospect Place began with an awesome tour led by Amy. She guided us through the entire house and its history. And as we explored, we noticed that although the house is equipped with electricity, many of the rooms are primarily lit by lamp. And so as you would leave those areas, you'd turn the lamps off. So after our tour, we decide we better go outside and capture some photos of the outside of the house and the barn before it gets too dark. So we go out and do that. And as it gets darker, we're walking back towards the front of the house. And one of my team notices that there's a lamp on the second floor. So initially we just assumed that, we must have forgotten to turn one of them off, because that's the logical explanation. So we go upstairs and we're like, okay, this time we'll flip it off. And while we were there, we checked for a loose switch, loose wires, but couldn't identify any. Also, this room is known as the boys' room. So again, this is the room that's rumored to be haunted by the spirits of the children that previously lived there and possibly an adult male. So while we're setting up the second floor cameras, Ashley's downstairs on the first floor and is trying to get a hold of me by walkie-talkie, but I had absentmindedly leaned into something and changed the channel. Ashley's trying to get a hold of me because she's experiencing creaking noises from the room next door. Was it paranormal? Not sure. But again, definitely an odd start to the night. So later on, we're on the second floor, and we're in Mary Jane's room, who is George's second wife. And as we're wrapping up our EVP Spirit Box session in there, we're walking out the door into the second floor hallway, and once again notice that the lamp in the boys' room is on again. So again, this is just perplexing us because at this point, we know we've turned it off. And so we go back in and we turn it off again. So fast forward a few more hours, and we're gathered in the second floor. It's basically this room that was used as a living room, and it's the one that's directly across the hall from the boys' room. And we're doing an EVP Spirit Box session, and we had just wrapped up seconds after Ashley had kind of taken her headphones off. And Drew, who's the only one with a clear view of the boys' room across the hallway, suddenly gets really excited, and he starts saying, "Ball, ball, ball." And we're like, what's going on? And we all get up and we look across the hallway, and sure enough, one of the cat balls that we had set on the floor in the boys' room and pointed a camera at had started to flash on its own. So as a reminder, cat balls are just these cheap little plastic cat toys that work based off of motion. So if you hit it or you move it, it'll activate these multicolored flashing lights. And they're great ghost hunting tools for that reason. So we're like, okay, we're pretty sure we captured this on camera, so we'll add that to our collection, and we'll go and review the footage later. So now this room has definitely got our attention. So despite long hours of quiet, these moments of activity completely made the night worthwhile and got us obviously very excited. And you'll hear that in the footage, the audio footage. But what was interesting later is after reviewing the footage, I discovered more anomalies. Caught the lamp turning on by itself a second time, accompanied by what appears to be a shadow moving towards the bed, and another different cat ball activating as well. So this definitely got very interesting. So not only do we have the lamp turning on by itself once, but at least twice, if not a third time. And we also have a different cat ball activating at a very different time in the evening. Now, I'd also like to point out that at no point were we anywhere close to the room when these cat balls activated. One of the instances, we were all outside, completely outside and not even in the building. And the second time we were sitting down in a room all the way across on the other side of the hallway. During our EVP session, during the EVP session that was sort of disrupted by Drew identifying that a cat ball was going off, you hear us go in. And what's kind of interesting, and I didn't notice until later, is that you hear us walk into the room, and I continue to record the audio. You hear me ask, "Can you do it again?" And there is a sound directly after that. Sounds like a whisper, and I can't make out what it says. So hopefully somebody out there can kind of decipher and figure out what it's saying. But there's definitely a whisper, and what's really strange about it is that it left no audio signature at all. So everything that makes a sound leaves an audio signature, but for some strange reason, there is no audio signature on the file, and yet there is this strange whisper noise. So I'm going to play that for you now. Check it out, see what you think, and then after that, I'm going to play you some more of the interview with Amy, who is making me feel slightly less crazy because we were not the only ones who experienced the lamp turning on by itself.
Mr. Adams, did you love your first wife? Mr. Adams, did you love your second wife, Mary Jane?
Mary.
Okay. That's a no.
Are you asking questions at all?
Yeah.
Okay, because it said John.
Yeah, I'm with you, George. My name is John. Thank you.
George, where's John in this room?
Visit.
What?
Visit? Yeah, I'm visiting. You're right. I've been very excited about visiting your house, George, for a very long time, and I'm very happy to be here.
Mr. Adams, were you a fan of cigars? Did you like smoking cigars? Did you like drinking?
Clarissa. Challenge.
Yeah, I challenge you to...
No.
Oh, fine. Okay. You said Clarissa earlier. Is there something that you'd like to tell us about Clarissa? Is there anything else you'd like to say to us, Mr. Adams?
Fire.
Fire. Are you talking about when this home was being built? It was burnt down originally?
Can you touch the red light for us, Mr. Adams?
Worried. Now.
What are you worried about?
Helen. Can't remember if there's a Helen or not.
Are you saying that Helen would try to harm us?
George.
George.
Get out.
That's not very nice.
We're here to help.
Is George the one telling us to get out? So those are just a couple highlight clips of our EVP and Spirit Box sessions where you can hear the names George and Clarissa coming through. The next clip I'm going to play for you is the one that I referred to earlier, where it's right after we noticed that one of the cat balls has been activated in the boys' room. And you'll hear me ask for them to do it again. And then right after that, listen very closely for the whisper. Can you do it again? Make one of those balls touch one of them? Okay, I'll play it one more time. Listen very carefully. Can you do it again? Make one of those balls touch one of them? Could you make out the whisper? Paranormal? I have no idea, but definitely strange. Here's Amy sharing more stories connected with the second floor.
Our own staff had it happen just last week. They were closing up on a Saturday or Sunday, I think. Yeah, Saturday. And they thought they turned all the lights off, and they walked out, and they drove out, locked up the gate, and as they're driving down the road, they're looking at the house, and the lights were on. And so they had to turn around, go back and open the gate and go back in the house, go upstairs and turn the light off. And they knew darn well that they had turned everything off. That's part of our procedure, is to, go from top to bottom, turn the lights off and leave and lock up, And they knew they had done that. There was, two of our volunteers together, and they both witnessed that. Well, I know I've had experiences too, and lots of people have had experience of hearing footsteps. And that's kind of what the prominent thing is at Prospect Place, is hearing footsteps. When I first joined the board, I was opening and closing on the weekend, and we invite the public to come in between 12 and 4. And in the middle of the afternoon, nobody was there. And so I thought, I'm just going to sit down and take a break. So I sat down by the window in the dining room, which is now my favorite room. But anyways, I was just sitting there minding my own business, and I knew the house was totally empty. And all of a sudden I could hear footsteps. Somebody was walking in the hallway, and it was like a hard wooden type of heel, slowly walking on that hard wooden floor. And it was like walking around that corner, coming towards the dining room doorway that I was looking at from the corner. And I'm not one who sees things or hears things. And so, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was getting really scared. And all of a sudden the footsteps just stopped, like right in the doorway. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? And so obviously nothing happened to me. I'm still here to talk about it. But that was my first real experience, even though I've done investigations way back in the day there and a few other places. But that was my first experience of actually hearing something with my own ears. So I was just amazed. And a couple weeks ago, I don't know if I had told you this or it happened after you guys came, but one of the volunteers and I were locking up, and I was walking through the dining room. And she was walking out in that hallway, had turned off some lights, and we were going to meet in the hallway. And I get to the end of that dining room table, and I hear kind of like a growl, but more like a man sighing, just like, like that. And so I'm sure my eyes were really big, and I get out to my other volunteer in the hallway, and I said, "Did you just growl at me?" Because I'm so shocked. I'm like, I knew, in my head, I knew she didn't growl at me. It came from the dining room. And she's like, no, but I heard it too.
And here's Amy talking about some of the other spooky areas of the house.
Active place, as is the basement. The basement is a place that I'm not real comfortable in. Maybe I'm claustrophobic, I don't know, but
it's very creepy.
it can be creepy, especially in the dark. One of our volunteers' children, he's about 15, he loves the basement. And in the far back room, he'll go in there and he'll draw a tic-tac-toe in the dirt and then put his X in it, and he'll announce it, and he'll say, okay, it's your turn now. And then he'll walk down to the end of the hallway. And then when he comes back, he looks at that grid, and there's like a round mark, like a thumbprint for that other player, whoever that might be. And, I don't want to interact like that. I'm still a big chicken. So, but he loves doing that. He just, but the basement and the ballroom are the two places that most people love to investigate.
And like any house with this much history, Prospect Place is no stranger to its share of tragedy.
Well, and other things that we do know for sure was there were about 2 suicides there too. The one was actually one of the sons. After George died 2 days later, he shot himself. And then in the 1990s, Dave Longaberger owned the house, and he was going to make it his headquarters. Well, one of his construction people was having marital problems, and he came to the house and went to the second floor and shot himself as well. And I've had an experience on the second floor. I think I told you about turning off the lights and going floor by floor in the dark, outside. And so I'm getting a little leery, but by the time I got to the second floor, I heard this loud bang, and it sounded like a gunshot or like a cannon. I mean, it was loud, but it wasn't our furnaces in the basement. And you saw the one furnace, but it's a newer furnace. I mean, it doesn't kick on with such a loud bang noise. And so that experience really scared me for several months. I was not wanting to go there, unless other people were there with me. So, I mean, it's scary in the basement.
And here's another piece of evidence I wanted to share. In this instance, we were up on the second floor in the nursery. And to try to elicit a response, Joe and Drew decided to play Duck, Duck, Goose. What was interesting is when we went back to review the audio footage later, you hear what sounds like a child's voice saying, Goose. Here's the clip.
All right, it's your turn. You're the ducker now. Let us know when you say goose.
Well, I definitely, like I said, my favorite room now is that dining room where I had my, where I heard the footsteps, and now I've heard a growl. But also being up in that cupola, the Belvedere, I think I showed you the photograph that I took.
Yes.
We had the black light on, or I did. Anyways, I was up there alone again. And I had the lights on. I was just taking a beautiful picture with the blue light on and the sunset outside the windows. And the photograph, I mean, when I looked at it, it looks really cool. And I'm trying to enlarge it to see, what else is out there. And oh my gosh, I see an image of a man outside the window, more like a reflection. But when I try to see, try to debunk it and stuff, there's nothing in that cupola that would have matched this person's open shirt. It was a white shirt that was kind of open at the neck. There's nothing behind me that would look like that. And if you look really close, you can even see a hand and a belt buckle. And, that's just one of my favorite experiences too, because nothing like that happens to me except now on occasion I do get things like that. So I'm really, really happy about those kind of things. We definitely have so many others. I think I told you also, in the gentleman's parlor, we get the smell of cigar smoke. We even have individuals who've asked George in regards, because he always did business in that room. And so they asked him, how much should I pay for railroad stock? And when he played the recording back, it said 25. So, I mean, it's really cool. It's almost like George is still there. So, he's still doing business. My background, of course, is psychology. And so I know, the human mind wants to see a human face or a human figure. And so, I have to kind of counter that with the things that we do see and the photographs and so forth. So, it's kind of a balancing act, I guess. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that, yes, it is comfortable there. But when those things happen to me, I'm amazed and scared, but yet I don't run, I guess. Yeah. So, I walk fast, but I don't run.
That's a good. And to wrap up this episode and this series, here's Amy talking about ways that you can help donate to help keep places like Prospect Place up and running.
Okay. Well, we definitely appreciate you guys coming. We know you guys are solid individuals, and the house is 168 years old, and so it's getting a little decrepit. I mentioned that Dave Longaberger owned it at one time. he bought it because he grew up there and he always, saw it passing by and all that kind of thing. But in 1988, it was set for demolition. It had deteriorated that much. And so because he loved it so much, he thought that he could rescue it. And he did. He bought it. He put a new roof on it. He put new windows because local kids had broken them out. And he put new supports in for the cupola and a new banister that's still pieces of wood, 2x4s. So it really does need a lot of help and assistance in order to maintain it so it doesn't fall down, but also just to keep the lights on. So as I said, this is a nonprofit organization, a 501(c)(3). Everybody here is a volunteer, and we all donate our, what time or money we do have for certain things. And so we survive basically on donations. We also have a gift shop, but the majority is for individuals like you, John, who are interested in the history, but also the extra things that might go on in the night. And so we can't tell you how much we actually really appreciate you guys. So if anybody would want to donate or come visit and buy something, we are open on Saturdays and Sundays, 12 to 4 until November. The end of November, we do a little Christmas thing. But from the middle of March until about the end of November is when we're open, weekends only. And then also, if you wanted to actually stay there like you did and do your own investigation, you can go to our website and check those out. And there are dates. There's a calendar with dates that are available. We are actually one of the lowest priced venues around. And so, we're very common individuals. We're not upscale and all that. We just want to share what we have. And so we don't charge a whole lot. So go there and check out our website. It's the G.W. Adams Educational Center, and you'll find all kinds of history as well as ways to donate there too. So we appreciate you, John. That's all. I definitely want you to know that. And we do appreciate you.
Hopefully you all enjoyed this series as much as we enjoyed investigating the places that we featured. Let us know at thefromthevoidpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like us to do more locations in the future. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back in just a couple of days with a bonus Halloween episode and back next week with a brand new mystery. Until then, consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing so you don't miss a single new episode. And believe me, we're only getting started. Thanks for listening to From the Void, and happy Halloween.